Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. This is a public meeting of the Indiana Arts Commission, and today we are reviewing On-Ramp 2021 local fellowship proposals for the South Central cohort. I am Paige Sharp, Deputy Director of the Indiana Arts Commission, and today is Tuesday, October 19th, 1:30 p.m. 2021 Eastern Time. The panelists are meeting on Zoom and the public is observing by YouTube. And at this time, I would like the panelists and staff to introduce themselves, stating their name, occupation, and where they are currently located. And I will provide the first name of the panelist. And we'll start out with Jaleesa.
Hello, I'm Dr. Jaleesa Wells. I am an assistant professor of arts administration at the University of Kentucky, and so I'm located in Lexington, Kentucky, but I'm a Bloomington native, grew up in Bloomington my entire life, and kind of traveled the world, and now I'm back in America, hopefully sharing good news with people.
Great, thank you, Jaleesa. Joshua?
Hi, my name is Joshua Silbert. I'm a musician. I live in downtown Indianapolis, Indiana. I grew up in Bloomington, and I've traveled all over this fine country, and I'm very happy to be part of the panel today.
Great, thank you, Joshua. Dean.
Hi, I'm Dean Francis. I live close to Notre Dame, South Bend, Indiana, and I'm a commercial photographer, and I work for Fortune 500 companies. I'm commissioned by brands, clientele throughout the United States. I initially went to college at Kendall College of Art and Design up in Grand Rapids, Michigan. This is my first time as a panelist, and hope to learn what I can and contribute where I can. It's a good honor. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Dean. Shantae?
Hi, I'm Shantae Lewis. I'm a visual artist and illustrator, so I do painting and digital illustration. I am based out of Fishers, Indiana, and I do work in Indianapolis, and I have a studio in Noblesville. Originally from Massachusetts, but I've been here for about 10 or 11 years now.
Great, thank you, Shantae. And Jane.
Hi, my name is Jane Hachiya Weiner. I'm the artistic director of the Ballet Theater of Carmel Academy. So I come from a different area of the arts than visual arts. I'm a retired performing artist, also adjunct faculty at Anderson University School of Music, Theater, and Dance. And I want to join today as a collector and curator of all the different art forms that are represented, which are very integral to the performance productions that we present in the theaters, and offer my maybe not very expert yet very interested and collecting minded vision of what I saw. It's been an honor to be part of this panel, and I am so impressed and moved by all the lovely artwork that were represented by the cohorts of this On-Ramp 2021.
Great, thank you, Jane. And then I want to have our staff on the call introduce themselves, and we'll start with Amy.
Hi, I'm Amy Olsner. I am the fellowship manager for the South Central Indiana On-Ramp cohort. I was also one of the team leaders of the On-Ramp workshop this August. And I'm also a musician and the director of Girls Rock Bloomington, and I'm based in Bloomington.
Thank you, Amy. And Chapin.
Hey there, I'm Chapin Schnick, and while I'm based here at the Arts Commission office in Indianapolis, I live in Morgan County. So excited to see and hear about local artists, and I am just here in a tech role today.
Great, thank you, Chapin. So this panel is designed to gather feedback that will help the applicants strengthen their fellowship project to advance their career. And the discussion will also help IAC staff identify any important modifications that applicants may be required to make to their fellowship project before moving forward. I will announce the application we will review, and then I'll ask the first reader to begin the discussion. The first reader will provide advice to strengthen the fellowship project, focusing on the evaluation criteria from their perspective. Panelists, please note that the applications do not need to be recapped since everyone has read it. Just provide your comments. And after the first reader is finished, I will then ask the second reader to present any new, additional, or differing comments. We are not looking for consensus. We want the applicant to receive just excellent advice from the different perspectives that panelists bring to the table. And after the second reader has finished, I will open up the discussion for the final comments. And remember, in the interest of time, we are only looking for new, additional, or differing viewpoints. If a panelist has a conflict of interest, then that panelist will be placed in the virtual waiting room while the application is discussed. But I don't believe that we have a conflict with any of the applications here today. And finally, once the application has been discussed by the full panel, then we'll ask the panel to update their comments in the online system. It's common for some of the recommendations and conversations to daylight something they want to put in. So just note that the changes will save automatically. Do we have any questions before we begin? Okay. Well, then we will go ahead and get started with our first application from Amanda Webb, and our first reader is Jaleesa Wells.
Sure. So my comments for this one, I'm just going to kind of summarize these, is that their goals were big and broad, which I think is a good thing. And it's very clear what their vision for their career is. However, the one thing that I did add to this would be some specificity in how the goal is going to get them, how the project's going to get them to their career goals. And so I put into that, perhaps think about SMART goals. How can you be specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time-bound? I feel like I've said that so many times because I've been teaching students about it lately, but it's really useful sort of task to do to kind of give you those specific measurabilities of how you get from A to B. So that's one thing that I added to that. Feasibility, I thought that was fine. One of the things that I did ask was, do you make money from the gigs in Brown County? And for them to put that into their budget somewhere. Talk about, yeah, we either plan to get that as income or perhaps there's some expenses to go with that. So I think that's something to add into it because it felt like that was a key part of the application. And then community engagement, I thought it was fine and addressed the points, but I would be curious for them to speak more to the blues community because I believe this is a blues musician. She's connecting to blues. And so I'd like to know, like, how are you connecting this project to that community from which you've kind of arisen, right? So how does your work and does your community engagement impact sort of this wider community that you're part of? Those are my feedback points.
Great, thank you, Jaleesa. Dean?
Yeah, excellent. I'm in total agreement with Jaleesa. And some of the points that I kind of outlined, nailing down on the goals, I wanted her to tell us a little bit more about seeking out and identifying a proven producer and how that will take her career to the next level. So what would that producer do for you? What are all the things, all the details? And then second to that, what are your contingencies should studio results not align with your project? So I always like to try to look one step ahead and then another step and what you can do to make adjustments as you need. For the feasibility, please explain more about the producer time, pre-project commitment, presence at the studio, make some involvement, just some more details. And finally, for community engagement, what additional ways could you involve the greater community during the album creation process? I think that generates interest. I think that generates movement and momentum. And how can you expand the reach of your genre of music to capture more listeners outside of that audience?
Great. Other comments from other panelists? Okay, so hearing none, I will go ahead and provide a little bit of time to update any comments that you have to put in the online system, y'all. And while we give some time for that, go ahead and queue up Brick Daniel Kyle, which is our next applicant. So we'll just give a little bit of time. When you're done updating those comments, just give me sort of a heads up.
I have a quick clarifying question for Jaleesa.
Sure.
When you said to include in the budget the Brown County gigs income, did you mean the final concert that she's planning once the album is released? or other concerts?
I think in the application, they talked about having just gigs that they do in general and like
Okay,
having
so
like some place they go to in Brown County. And I was like, include that as part of that
if
income.
that's
because
happening throughout the year.
Yeah, if that's happening, yeah.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
Shalisa, are you good to go? Okay, great. So again, we're with the applicant Rick Daniel Kyle, and our first reader is Joshua.
I think this idea is fantastic, and I'm very excited for the implementation and this being a good stepping stone to a healthier career. The only issue I had with the goals section was just kind of, I'd like more specificity with the annual aspect, and maybe focus more on this individual project, because it sounded like getting more subjects into the first time would be a free opportunity, but they mentioned doing this annually, and I don't know if doing a free annual thing is the goal or an idea, or I just wanted kind of more tangible, what's the word I'm looking for? More clear cut explaining on the annual aspect. And then I would, just a suggestion, like include the working with the LGBT community, move that to the, it doesn't have to leave the goals section, but definitely add it to the community engagement section. Feasibility, I had some issues. I want this project to succeed, so I would hate for all of the faith to be put into a passive promotion, such as flyers. Like, let the flyers be a secondary or tertiary promotional thing. Force yourself to do in-person networking, schedule, you know exactly who's coming when, so there are no questions, there's no X factors that you have to deal with. Kind of like aim high, plan for the best, but also be realistic and plan for the worst. Especially since only one day is scheduled. Oh, I just hate it if something happened where, no spots are filled. So I just want there to be more concrete, tangible, locking in subjects for the day. And then community engagement. I think there just needs to be some more cross-pollinating as far as, opening the definition of community, LGBTQ, the food world, musicians. There's absolutely no reason to not cross-pollinate those groups of people, and that's a fantastic way to network and get the name out for the future photo shoots. So those are kind of my big thoughts.
Great, thank you. Dean?
Oh, you're muted.
You're muted, Dean. Dean? There we go.
All right, thank you. I'm in absolute agreement. On the goals portion, would advertising earlier through more channels generate more engagement? The sooner the better. Again, thinking one step ahead. And can you expand your reach by including other interest groups beyond the artists and musicians? So what would be a complementary type of group or interest that would expand? And then working down to the feasibility, you're dealing with a commercial photographer. So, this is a positive and negative for you. It doesn't take much as far as camera equipment to achieve anything nowadays, even some of the cheapest stuff out there. So I'd like you to explain a little bit the camera, the lens, the lighting you currently use, and why they're insufficient. A portion of your grant is going to be used for that. So I'd like to see just a little bit more explanation. And would there be a financial or technical or future-proof advantage in purchasing, like you explained, mirrorless Canon ESR might work in R6 instead of the older DSLR you've identified. So I just want to make sure that the funds that you use and the investments that you make in it are future-proof as best as possible. So you could look at maybe some other equipment. That's an option that you have. And I know funds are something you have to take into consideration. And then with community engagement, would completing multiple shoots allow more creativity and generate more community engagement? Again, thinking 2 steps ahead. If you get one shoot, you garner more interest, that leads to another, and it increases. So would increasing your editing time frame also allow you to have a little bit more of your artistic vision realized?
Other thoughts? Feedback? Jane?
I agree. I believe it's Dean who spoke first. Is that true?
Joshua?
Second.
It wasn't Joshua. I'm sorry. Joshua, I cannot agree enough about the need for marketing. And it's always surprising in our line of business exactly how much targeted marketing is needed to draw the target group to such events, especially when it's a short-term event. So I just resonate with comment a lot. That is all.
Great, thanks, Jane. Other thoughts? Amy?
I just had a quick question for Josh. Could you just speak a little bit more about the idea of cross-pollinating between different groups so that I can make sure I explain that concept to Brick well?
So reading the application, there seems to be a good interaction with some different restaurants. And initially it's mentioned to do, some drag artists and musicians alike. So right there, that's 3 separately identified groups. Now, certainly you can, by all means, have a drag artist that is a musician that works in a restaurant. But I guess I was thinking, like, what are ways you can introduce a musician to the drag artist or the drag artist to the rainbow bakery? Like, what if there was a way to combine food photography with LGBT? What if there was some kind of, we're doing a pride thing with these pastries, or what if we're doing an album release and show your ticket stub and get $5 off on a bagel at this place? I mean, just kind of like really casting a wider net as energetically as possible, I guess. Does that make sense?
Yes, that helps a lot. Thank you.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for asking about that, Amy. I wondered too, and Joshua, that's a very helpful explanation. So yeah, finding those natural organic connections between those different groups, I think, is a fabulous idea. Well, fantastic. So we'll go ahead and close out whatever comments you have in the online system for the applicant, and then queue up for the next application, which is Daniel Alexander. And we'll give a few minutes to update those comments, unless, Jaleesa, you're fine. And then wait for, and Jane can cue that up. So Jane, when you are ready, you can go ahead and get started as our first reader.
Okay. First of all, I really enjoyed the art samples of Daniel's work, which is my favorite part of evaluating these, is looking at these wonderful samples and clips on YouTube. So that was wonderful. As far as my feedback on goals go, what I did say was that I found this artist's goals rather multi-pronged, which is not necessarily a bad thing. And I was wondering if he might be able to articulate his hierarchy of priorities a little bit better to produce clear results via his YouTube offerings. My question for this artist is, of the multiple goals he listed in his initial introduction, how does his priorities fall from most important to least important? For instance, does he want to showcase his own art processes from beginning to end to reach a greater audience for his own artwork? Or does he want to make the YouTube videos as tutorials involving guests from the arts field, including the artist himself? Or is he making a YouTube feature that's simply a discussion and brainstorming forum? Since he mentions all three, it's a little bit like Asian ramen. I'm not sure which is the main ingredient. And I would like to see him prioritize what the goal is, because the others will ultimately be byproducts of his first goal, since they integrate so well, I believe. I think that as far as feasibility goes, in general with Daniel's application, I found it very broad and exciting, but lacking in a few specifics. So maybe the other panelists can ask more specific questions. I would think that this is a rather time-consuming project. I was wondering how this artist in the feasibility area was going to compensate himself while fulfilling this day job. I don't see that he delineated any funds set aside for compensating himself. I'm under the assumption that he's engaged in these endeavors before, and I trust that he's able to donate of his valuable time if this is ultimately his goal. Am I clear so far? Okay. Community engagement. I think that this YouTube project has wonderful potential. It would have been helpful for me as a panelist, especially as a layperson when it comes to such endeavors, if he listed how the artist plans to reach out to his target YouTube audience. I really appreciated, I'm sorry, I'm looking sideways, but that's where my writing is. I appreciate the information about those assisting setting up the YouTube channel, et cetera, but did not see much about how he planned to promote and, for lack of a better word, market or create awareness of the existence or to showcase the value of these YouTube channels. It sounds like very good content's being planned, and would like to see more specifics about how this artist plans to reach out to the specific local arts organizations to raise awareness for his YouTube forums so that more of the community can ultimately collaborate in creating an online community for the exchange of these ideas. So that was my basic input into this lovely young man.
Awesome, great, thank you, Jane. Joshua?
I agree with Jane. She made some very, very good points. I did feel that the goals were clearly stated, how I read it. Feasibility, I think the last section of what Jane just said about community engagement should arguably be added to the feasibility section, because she makes a really, really good point about how are you going to get viewers for the YouTube channel. My initial response to the feasibility is I thought it was absolutely feasible, and that there's plenty of detail as far as, you know, thinking big as far as a time allowance to get all this in motion, as well as, you know, yay for acknowledging that there's going to be new software, new glitches, new gremlins to deal with, new equipment, and that always is just such a time killer. But it looks like they've included that in feasibility, so kudos to them for that. The only other thing I would add is in community engagement, maybe, and I'm sure this is because I'm a musician, but, you know, maybe think about including local musicians or composers for like a theme song or background music for the YouTube shows, videos, if needed. It's just another aspect of community engagement.
Great, thank you, Joshua. Other input, thoughts from the other panelists? Okay, then we're good to go. Go ahead and update your comments in the online system, and we'll move to the next applicant. Our next applicant is Dusty Lynn Baker. And when you're ready, our first reader is Dean.
Okay. In going through everything, I really liked the feel, the emotional impact, and the dedication that it takes to do something like this. But what I'd like to see as far as the goals is there more detail about monetizing the project for your well-being as an artist? And then second to that, would you be able to transform this into a future income via subscription or paid contributor model? And as far as feasibility, would you be able to adjust your grant expenditures to pay yourself a portion as an artist? And finally, with the community engagement, would it help to clarify your theme? And it's hard to nail down what your theme is when it is as wide reaching and as variable as yours might be with different locations and with different artists. So I'd like to see maybe a little bit of clarity with the theme, maybe narrowing it down a little bit more in its scope or its scale. Again, that's hard to define, but I think your theme right now is just a little bit open, and it's not like there's a specific direction that you're going with it. That may help, I don't know. And would it be helpful to define a more targeted audience?
Great, thank you, Dean. Jaleesa?
Dean's got it. Okay. It's all the same things that I was thinking. I'll just kind of reiterate that a little bit, and I put some detail in here. I felt like the goals were really broad, but perhaps they need to think of a more authentic way of generating their income. You know, how does their income align with their passion is what basically we said the same thing there. And literally I wrote down, how can your community become part of your income generation? Thinking about a subscription model that's community focused, like Patreon or something like that, right? So like, how are you doing something where you're giving to them, you're engaging with your community, you have that direct connection, but also able to monetize it, as Dean said. One of the things I wrote down in the feasibility is to see more of a timeline for their podcasts, because podcasts are extremely time sensitive projects. And would also be good to know where they're going to put these, and like when and how and why. And do they plan to pay the artists? I know they said they're going to get artists to come and talk to them and do all this stuff. Are you going to pay them? Because you're ideally going to monetize what they're talking about, so they should probably get paid for those things. So would that happen retroactively, and to put that into your feasibility as something you come back to later, or some way you're going to give them some remuneration? Yeah, I think I had a question about where they were going to get the extra personal contributions. That wasn't a question in there. And then with the community feedback, very similarly, it felt really broad to me. And I really wanted to know, considering that their project is so artist-centered, is who exactly is that community that you're looking for? Where in Indiana are you doing this? Like what cities, what rural areas, suburbs, like where are you going to have these stories? Because you talk to artists in Indianapolis, is going to be different from those in Evansville. It's going to be different from those in Gary, right? Like it's all different. And so I wanted to know like who exactly were you going towards? And yeah, if you're going to be making money off of that, then you need to sort of be clear about who the audience is and how you're going to reach them. Will you have a sort of launch party with the artists at some point to celebrate, here's all my podcasts and they're launching, I want to share that with everybody. So those are my thoughts.
Very helpful. Other input? Josh?
I had quite a few questions about the goals that are kind of related to some feasibility issues. And I had some very strong feelings about some of the gear that was going to be purchased, that I think that if tightening up the goal, by tightening up the goal, some of the feasibility gear issues will be answered. Because if it's not a podcast, why do you need a third microphone? If it is a podcast, maybe spend more money on better microphones. You know, it's just, there's a little bit of a jigsaw puzzle that I think would figure itself out once the specificity of the goals was figured out, if that makes sense.
kind of holding off to see if Amy would jump in just in case she needed more clarity, but I think it sounds like she's good. Other,
Sorry,
Amy?
no, I was just wrapping up my notes. Yeah, I did see your comment about that, Josh, and I think that's a good point. So basically, I mean, I think the goal is very clear that she does want it to be a podcast as the main goal for this
Okay.
project. So in that case, what would you recommend as far as gear?
Well, and I listed some links on some gear
Okay,
suggestions.
perfect. So I
But
can
then,
actually tell her that.
oh, absolutely, yeah, by all means, by all means. But then the other thing is, if it's a podcast, and that's fine, and that's an interesting idea, it's just hard for me to wrap my head around writing exercises via podcast. So
Right.
that combined with I wasn't entirely sure what the budget allocation for rental spaces included or meant, or
Yes.
so.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think-
everything I said in the comments. So
Got it. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I can look back at that.
Great, thank you, Joshua. Anything else? All right, great. Go ahead and wrap up your comments and queue up our next applicant, who is Georgia Mitchell, and our first reader. It looks like she's already ready. Jaleesa.
Yeah. So this one, I feel like I have much less feedback, but that's partly because I feel like it was a bit more cut and dry than maybe some of the other ones. And this one really tied her project to a very real thing, like the IU First Fridays or whatever. And so I our first Thursday festival. So I felt like I was like, there's a through line to this. One of the things, however, I will say this, and actually I feel like I'm going to be on repeat saying this in many of these, but one of the things that I feel like could be talked more about in some of the community engagement pieces is how their projects are going to impact their communities they've identified. So this one is pretty clear, like of course IU, Bloomington, and sort of those intersecting networks, the craft networks, all that stuff. But how then does what you're doing actually impact it? And I feel like there's a lot of target marketing conversation, but not like, this is how I'm going to engage it. And then now I've made an impact on this community in some way. So I don't know if I'm reading the things too deeply or not, but that's my biggest feedback on this one.
Okay, great, thank you. Shantae?
So my thoughts were, the ultimate goal was to be a working artist, but what does that mean for her? I know that she mentioned textiles and jewelry and maybe focusing on one initially. She can do both, but focusing mainly on one and buying equipment for one might be a better idea, and then adding a secondary, let's say starting with jewelry and then maybe adding fashion later, because the equipment necessary to start this business could be a lot once you start trying to purchase here for textiles and jewelry for this. So maybe having a focused goal on what a working artist looks like initially, and then adding on to that. And also before investing in marketing such as Instagram and Facebook ads, doing some research on whether actually paying for ads is going to make sense, because I know a lot of times from experience that putting so much money into those ads don't really turn out to be what you think they may be, unless you have so much money to put in, like thousands of dollars. And then the university is a great way to connect with the audience in Bloomington, and build a relationship with the community and a relationship with the university. So.
Other input from other panels? Or does he similarly agree or not agree? Okay. Great, well, thank you. Go ahead and update your comments and then queue up our next application, which is Janet Chilton. And when you're ready, Shantae is our first reader.
So for Janet, I thought that the goals were clear and the numbers were realistic for what she's trying to accomplish. But as far as long-term goals, be a little bit more specific and clear on those. And for the project timeline, have these numbers been proven through past art sales, and are the numbers realistic? Also, for community engagement, how is the work meaningful to the community, and is it something the community actually needs? And benefits seem to be more targeted towards the audience than the community. So that was my feedback for that. So the benefits seem to be more focused towards the artist itself, and I just would like to see how the community would benefit from this project.
Okay, thank you, Shantae. Jane?
Hi, so I was very intrigued by this lady's artwork. It resonates with my interest in movement. And this artist obviously comes highly credentialed and seems to be well poised to take on a new form of marketing strategy to promote her artwork. She's quite articulate in describing her goals. So I think that part was great. As far as feasibility goes, I think I reflect what Shantae said a little bit. And I mentioned, she's willing to invest her personal funds to leap into this new market. And I suppose we have to go on the assumption that her estimated revenue from art sales is based on concrete figures of her past sales. And so the feasibility part, I'm just going on an assumption that her numbers are based on her past numbers. Community engagement. So again, like Shantae, my impression, and I might be mistaken, is that this artist is still exploring exactly who her artwork will be ultimately meaningful to at this stage in her exploration. She seems to have a good network of artists and organizations that can aid her in achieving these specific goals of this grant. I think, interacting with the other cohorts on this particular on-ramp would be a good starting place. It seems like a fabulous avenue for her and other accepted artists to explore various avenues to further expose themselves to other buyers and greater communities. But again, it was nebulous, but feasible. Finally, this is kind of personal, and so if this is not the forum for it, I'm actually very intrigued by this artist's creative processes. It has where she uses a great amount of intuition to inspire her productivity in a short amount of time, and then she edits her work or harvests her work afterwards. I'm wondering if some of her artwork would be very compatible installations for places like movement studios or theaters or intersecting with the performing arts. So I actually had quite a bit of interest in this artist, but that's just an aside. So that was my community engagement feedback.
Great, thank you, Jane.
There you have it.
Any other input before Amy jumps in? Okay, Amy, how about it?
Jane, could you just explain a little bit more when you said that it might be a good starting point for her to interact with her cohort? Could you talk
Well, as she was articulating her goals, my impression was that, and just like me and all these others, we're launching into a new form of interaction through the virtual field so much and learning about, marketing our arts virtually. And my sense was she's exploring exactly who her artwork will be meaningful to. She seems to have a good network of artists that can aid her in achieving this goal. But as she interacts with the other candidates, or they're not candidates, the cohorts here, also the panelists, she might find a wider reach for her artwork through the connections she makes through this process today. Does that make sense?
So kind of as in connecting with them and seeing who their audience is.
Right, connecting with them to see who their audiences are, and also who might express an interest in her particular style of artwork. I think she's got quite a market for performing artists, actually, through the performing arts, actually.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'll definitely pass that on.
Lobbies of theaters and public spaces where people are moving. I think her artwork's quite compatible.
Great, got it? All right, awesome. Well, then we will go ahead and move forward with the next application, which is Jennison Snyder. And the first reader is Julissa.
Yeah, so goals for that. I'm not a music person, so anybody who's music could be like, you're wrong, school me, please. But one of the things that I said is I said the goals are good. However, it's not necessarily to start separate LLCs for every single project that you're doing. I don't know if that's a standard that people do, but I was like, you don't need that many things. Perhaps, I believe they said something about having a music house. Perhaps your music house is your LLC and that holds all your projects underneath it. Sure, so that was really, that was the main thing on the goals that I wrote. The feasibility section on this one, I said was fine, but why not charge for your performances? It's not any more accessible to offer free things to people than it is to charge a subsidized rate, right? So, and this would also, of course, be income and revenue that can be reinvested. So if they're thinking from like a social enterprise perspective, they can actually reinvest that back into their organization to provide even more services and more programs. So I said they should figure out or consider figuring out the value of their services and then developing a subsidy structure to offset the price for those who need subsidizing, right? Because you want to provide that value and make sure people can articulate that value. I also said that perhaps doing that might help remove the vagueness around their merchandising, which I didn't understand exactly what they were going to merchandise, but maybe that could offset that because it gives them more focus on their performance and their music. And then I said for the community engagement that I thought this was one of the clearest applications on community engagement. I'm trying to pull it up here. Because it really had a trajectory. It felt like it was like a clear, I think what Dean was like step by step. It felt like there was like a step, like I'm going to start here with my network and then I'm going to build this and then I'm going to go here and here's how I'm impacting that. And so I thought that was a good example of kind of what I was hoping to see in more of the community engagement sections.
Thanks, Julissa. Joshua, our music person.
Let's see, the long-term goal is very clearly stated. I feel that the project goal, although stated clearly, is too focused on a single performance. And I think that going through the goals section with a little cloud above your head thinking, think bigger, like adding an S to the word performance or event, or, you know, adding things like regularly performed, like don't put all your eggs into one performance because what if one thing goes wrong, you know? So like, just if you want to become a full-time musician, one performance is just one performance. There are dozens, hundreds, thousands of performances. And also I have to say, just being a musician, knowing what I know, owning a PA, owning a sound system it's only one small part of the puzzle. It's a very helpful piece, but there are just as many gigs where it has no impact. So just, you know, think of it as a puzzle piece to work out the longer career term goals. Just my 2 cents. Feasibility, I think doing another pass through the feasibility section, all the while thinking, what is the project goal? What are my long-term goals? Would do a lot to help. And I also, you know, don't rethink the wheel. You can create your own event and that is absolutely fine, but there are quite a few events around town that are already in place that there's, why not be part of that? Penrod Arctic, Penrod is a great example where there are built-in crowds with something like Penrod, and then you can spend more time focusing on the music instead of promoting and getting people out. When you put on your own event, as I've done, it's like creating your own event. You're spending so much more time promoting than dealing with the music side of things. And then the only other feasibility thing is with the budget. There was no budget allocated for online anything, band website, blog, any ads, Facebook ads for. Again, it was just the physical flyers, and I wanted the flyers to be a part of a promotional campaign kind of thing, just to think bigger. Community engagement, I thought it was very clear and very well thought out.
Great, thank you. Any other input from the panelists? Okay. Then we'll go ahead and move on to the next application, which is Justine Scott Lemon, and our first reader is Joshua.
All right, I'm pulling it up. I think I know which one this is. Okay, this idea is really interesting. I'm so intrigued by it. Goals wise, I would like some more details about the film aspect of the project, and I'm not entirely sure I understand where the guide film will be viewed or how the guide film will be made or shared or distributed. It could be after the installation is up, posted on YouTube. I just need more clarification. I would also like more information on the indigenous building practices part of the project. If the artist is an indigenous artist, incorporate that into the project in a more clear way, and that could be part of the community engagement. Or I would be fearful of any kind of cultural appropriation in this day and age. Feasibility, I definitely need more details on the guide film, and this kind of is tied into the budget. Who's shooting the guide film? Who's editing it? Nuts and bolts. Does it have sound? Is it silent? Does it have music? Is it stock music? Is it custom music? And again, where and how is the film being shown after the structure comes down? And community engagement. I'm trying to read what I wrote real quick. One sentence kind of struck me as odd, is targeting the locals in eateries and bars would almost make more sense with like a lighter musical theatrical performance, whereas something as intimate and intense as like this grief structure, that sentence in particular just seemed kind of odd. And I think it just struck me as very weird, where I was like, definitely take a step back and like, maybe go to community meetings that are specifically dealing with grief and dealing with hospice-like groups. Certainly not to prey on anyone, but to just kind of like, by letting people know that this really interesting and really fascinating sculpture and structure and guide film are available, I think that would be a better way to engage the community than, promoting it in a bar or a restaurant. Just my 2 cents. I'm trying to think if I had anything else. I think that was it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Joshua. Shantae?
So I agree with Joshua. There was a lot of missing pieces in this project. And so at the end, I was really unclear of what the grief space is. Is it like grief after a death, or like childhood trauma, a lifelong grief, just ongoing dealing with grief? And also is the grief space, like I believe he mentioned actual space, like a physical space. Or is it going to be an installation, or is it just like a mental space where people get together and, talk through things? So I'm having to find myself go back and read several times, and I'm still unclear at the end. As far as timeline and budget, just because I'm so unclear about the project, I'm not sure if that like the timeline or budget is realistic and feasible for that. And for the community engagement, it seems like he wants it to happen on the ground level and directly reaching the people in the community and impacting the community. So I thought that was okay. But again, I'm so unclear on the project, not understanding if it's actually something the community needs, or even how that looks in the community as far as like a physical mental space or just a temporary installation.
I can just clarify the project if anyone would like to know. From my understanding, is that it's going to be a mobile grief space, so it's a physical installation that people can enter, and it'll be put every month in different locations around Indianapolis. Sorry, that's my daughter in the background. And then throughout this process, she will be documenting it, and then one moment. Okay. Throughout this process, she'll be documenting it, and then at the end in December, she was hoping to have an exhibit with the actual mobile space, as well as the guide film at the gallery.
So that brings up a quick question for me. When it's a mobile installation, and it's on my comments for this lovely young lady, does she need permits or anything when it is a installation? Is she going to have to get clearance from the city or whatever? I don't think you can just put an installation down without clearance from city government and things, is what I'm guessing. So I'm wondering if she can add some of that research into her project.
Gotcha. Dean?
I'm in agreement with that. And one of the questions I had was, have you consulted with local, state, and private entities about liability,
Right,
insurance, given the nature of the installation and unknown visitors? And then also, would diagrams or blueprints help with kind of explaining what's going to happen, and maybe some of the questions or concerns that will pop up prior to the installation being open to the public?
yeah, I agree. Having said all that, I think, I find great value in giving the American culture a place and permission to grieve. I come from a different culture. I'm half Japanese, and different cultures deal with grief differently. So I think there's an inherent value to this project if she could just fill in some more of these details and the very good questions that all of these panelists are asking.
Can I add some comments to this? So I think what Joshua said in the beginning, particularly around appropriation, and that was one of the things that I wrote about on this, was that the creator needs to really explain the quality of care and responsibility to the Indigenous communities that they're going to be engaging with, because these communities have had enough things taken from them and being exhibited in spaces that they're not actually able to access many times. And so I think it's important for them to recognize that. And then kind of going back through it, I appreciate that perhaps dominant American white culture may not seem like it has a grieving ritual, but I do think that America itself has many grieving rituals, and perhaps that's something that this artist needs to do a little bit of research to find some of the ones that maybe aren't on the surface, right? The things that are beyond what we expect to see as grieving rituals. And so I feel like those two things, like going back and doing some of that really thoughtful, tangible work and adding that to their application, will enhance their project, because it really makes it seem so intentional, and it feels very much like a place to be invited to have that grief structure. And it doesn't feel like just a place where you're sharing maybe your own grief narratives, and then someone's taking that, extracting it, and putting it somewhere that maybe you never see it again, right? So those are my comments.
I had one final. Jane and Dean made excellent points. I didn't even think about this, about the logistics of a physical installation and local state laws. But I was thinking about just if recording the process is part of the project, does that mean that people entering the grieving structure are going to be filmed? Grieving is a really, really intimate thing. And if you're filming people, you're going to need individual consent if they're going to be part of the film that's going to be showed later. And I just think the combination of the intimacy of grief, but needing consent for the final project could be a speed bump to be aware of.
So a lot of really robust feedback. What sounds like a fascinating, really neat project from my point of view. I mean, everybody feels grief and experiences grief in their own way. I feel like it'd be fascinating to see how it sounds like you're helping really hone it and guide it to a place that really will put it to that level of power that I think it really could be, it sounds like. So thank you for all of that coaching and valuable feedback. And I'm looking forward to watching this artist to see what results, because I think that's pretty fabulous. So the next application to review, I believe, is what, Krista Hall. And our first reader is Jane.
Okay. So for Krista's evaluation form, I began with the goals and fee. I think this artist was very articulate in her application and outlining her goals. And my understanding is that she'll create unique films to showcase her gifts and talents in order to create a client base that can eventually enable her to make filmmaking her full-time profession. And as a sidebar, to find opportunities for further education as a filmmaker. So those are two very clear goals. I personally resonate with this artist's subject matter. She does documentaries about families. And I think that's a much desired and needed form of artistic expression in our current society. I found her feasibility outlining quite clear. I had no issues with that. I might suggest, I don't want to meddle with her artistic vision, but it looks like she's got a lot of budgeting set aside for music rights, which is, trust me, in my line of work, a mystery and an awe and a wonderful, terrible thing to have to deal with when you're doing performing arts. But might I suggest that music from the public domain for some of her use in film work might be something that she could consider, as long as it doesn't hamper her artistic vision. Also, I'm hoping that she's showcasing families in her rural area of Jasper, Indiana. It would be really exciting to see her. Well, this might overlap with community engagement, but broaden her client base and see about adding different musical genres when she's working with families from different settings and different configurations. So the community engagement part, I'm kind of repeating myself again, but it looks like her goal for now is to showcase the beauty of Jasper and the richness of the life of the families locally. I'm hoping that her work grows and that her client space will give her an opportunity to use her obvious filmmaking talents in showcasing more of a variety of families from a wider geographic area. It's so nice that this artist has contacts lined up for further engaging with local and geographically distant businesses for collaboration and for further exploration. So I found her project quite exciting. And that's my feedback.
Thank you, Jane. Joshua?
I thought the goals were very well thought out and clearly stated. Feasibility, absolutely feasible. The timeline provided is arguably one of the most thoroughly thought out thus far. So well done on that. Community, All I said was I wouldn't remove anything that's already there. It's solid, well written, but maybe include the families that are being filmed as part of the community, because obviously they are. And without engaging those people, the community, the project wouldn't exist. So that's kind of worked into the project, and I would just add that to the community portion of the application.
Thank you, Joshua. Anything else? Okay, great. Would you guys like to take a break? I know that we started a half an hour earlier than this came on live, so it's been about an hour and a half. So we can continue on, but I'm just getting a pulse on the panel to see if you guys would like to take a 10-minute break. Yes? No?
Either is fine. I think that we're on a roll, so I'm okay. But if other people would like a break, that's great also.
Dean, I'm happy for us to take a quick break if you want to take a break.
Okay, you want to take a break? I'm fine with that.
Okay, let's just do a quick 5 minutes, y'all. Yeah, get some water, eat a candy bar. All right, we'll see you at 2:36.
Sure.
Joshua, where in Bloomington did you grow up?
The first neighborhood I lived in was Spicewood, and then I moved to Night Ridge over on the east side, and then across 3rd Street to Park Ridge East.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I grew up on the east side, but I think we started, I don't know what the neighborhood would have been called, but it was like on the south-ish side somewhere. But then,
Do
you know,
you remember where, like some cross streets or whatever? Or?
no, because we moved when I was so young. We ended up moving to the east side when I was like a toddler. So I
Okay.
basically I grew up on the east side. But yeah.
It was a really, I had such a kind of delightful childhood. Like it was a perfect place to grow up.
Bloomington is fun. It's weird coming back to it, like especially after I've been abroad. And then I came back to it and like things are gone, like Putt Putt's gone, like Jiffy Treat's all like smaller. And I'm like, where are all the things that I remember? So yeah.
I don't know what kind of music you're into, but if you are a fan of world music or, you know, whatever music, if you've never been to the Lotus Music Festival, I highly recommend.
Yeah. I
coming
think
to
I
the-
went once as like a teenager. And then when I moved to Chicago, they have a world music festival there. And I was talking to
Okay.
Illinois Arts Council because I did like an internship with them. And they're like, oh, you're from Bloomington. We base our world music festival off of the Lotus Festival in Bloomington. And I was like,
Yeah. Yep.
yeah, we're the best.
Yeah. I go to Lotus. I try and go to, I didn't go this past year or the year before because of COVID, but it's like my annual, I'm going to go recharge my batteries.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Great.
love it.
Well,
I
fun.
miss-
I always love to hear people like endorse awesome art projects or programs. Lotus is for sure an amazing project. So we're gonna keep going, and I appreciate all the great feedback you're providing to strengthen the applications. And I certainly also encourage you to share things that you found that were really strong and compelling to help. I think balance some of that feedback. It kind of helps, I think, sometimes to really make sure that this is an empowerment process for our artists who have, this is really kind of intense territory to be working in. So just something to share and keep you moving forward. So our next application to get us restarted is with Lindsey Krantz, and our first reader is Dean.
Okay, so for the goals and the feedback, this project's very timely, and I like that. And it's interesting now that we're moving past that timeline with the pandemic and the artists who have been evicted. So you're at the tail end of it being timely. So it's going to be a challenging project, but I still think it's very timely. So one of the questions about the goals was I wanted you to describe other ways you might reach your goal of 10 interviews with evicted artists, using that snowball example that you talk about in your timeline. Sometimes the snowballs don't roll down the hill and they stop and they don't build that momentum. So I'd like to see some backup for that should your snowball sample not work, and would including community engagement from secondary or tertiary interviews beyond those 10 evicted artists provide additional audience reach and perspective. So like examples might include landlords, local governments, etc. And then for feasibility, if you could describe additional ways you could promote the project beyond audio, visual. And so I wrote down such as like written words, articles, opinion pieces. And finally, for community engagement, would it be possible to engage the local community through partnerships with homeless shelters, food pantries, nonprofits? And again, that might help when your snowball doesn't snowball and get bigger. Those are other areas that you could access and reach out to your community. And how can you further monetize the project for your well-being?
Great, thank you, Dean. Jane? Oh, you're muted, Jane.
Hello. Sorry about that. I'm pretty much in total agreement with everything I just heard. It's a very intriguing and timely issue to talk about. In community engagement, I kind of thought about the bigger picture of the fact that in our society and probably globally, it's often true that artists who practice their craft are able to do so often only because of an exterior financial support system. So this is a small spotlight of a bigger conversation about artists in the world in general. A lot of us have day jobs or have spouses that support, the arts. I don't think that's going to change anytime soon, but I think it's a conversation that can continue. I don't feel qualified much to say much beyond what I've said above, but I'm reminded that the housing insecurity issue and the multifaceted reasons for housing insecurity for individuals, not just for artists, is a great problem. And I think anything that sheds a spotlight on that is a wonderful endeavor. So this is a fantastic endeavor. That is all.
Thank you, Jane. Other comments? Okay, well, we'll go ahead and move forward with the next application, which is Lisa Dodson. And our first reader is Shantae.
So I felt like this project had a very clear goal. Quilt making is her main thing, and she's adding card making to her medium. And I like that she has different streams of income that all relate. So quilt making, the card making is like an additional stream of income because they're such related mediums, and then selling courses related to card making and quilt making. So all the streams of income are tied into one medium and not just all over the place, just trying to make money. I like that it's clear, and she has a really good goal for that. As far as the timeline was good, all she has to do is really purchase material. As far as community engagement, so she has a broad base for community engagement, and she had some, I guess, issues with budgeting, trying to figure out what materials she needs to purchase. And I feel like if she has a more specific audience, instead of just saying a broad base, she can focus on buying materials that cater to the smaller audience instead of trying to buy so many materials that she may not even use in the end. So I think just really focusing, and it sounds like she's still trying to figure out who her audience is for the card making as well. So once she figures that out, the budget will be more clear and concise, and she can purchase exactly what she needs to purchase instead of a broad range of materials. So that's all I have.
Great, thank you. Dean?
Yeah, Shantae had great input. If I can tag on to that with the goals, I just want you to explain your workshop fees you offer and how you're going to monetize them for profit. That's just to help you. And can you expand your marketing reach through social media, local venues, other unexpected avenues? And for the feasibility portion, would increasing the size of your workshops or the frequency have benefits for you? And finally, for community engagement, what additional clients or areas of interest could you include in your marketing reach? And would partnering with other community organizations, maybe unexpected artist cooperatives, help you reach new or additional customers?
Great, thank you, Dean. Other comments from the panel? It's like most people are kind of in agreement. All right, then we will move on to our next application. Again, this will be with our first reader, Shantae, on Matthew Ray Ramsey. Oh, and Shantae, you're on mute.
I don't have much feedback on this project at all. Like, this was a really good application. I thought it was very clear on the project goals as well as the timeline and budget. It seems like he has great experience on writing grants. So that was awesome. I really don't have any, let's see. The Facebook group is a great idea, especially during these times where people are going to social media trying to find out new things to do. It would be nice to see more in-person community engagement. It's understandable why he's not going that route, but we are getting back into the community, so it would be nice to see those in-person events. And yeah, that's all I had.
Great, thanks, Shantae. Jaleesa?
I had a different reaction to this one. So which is fine, right? Yeah. So I felt like it was very narrative in the goals section, which was nice, but I wasn't sure, it wasn't concise. Like I felt like it was like this wonderful, and I was really into the narrative, like, oh yeah, okay. But then I was like, wait, but what are we doing here? And so I had to kind of like go back to do that. And essentially I was asking the question, what is sort of your revenue goal for these calendars, Indiana themed 2023 calendars? And did it serve as an investment for other projects? So I think they talked about wanting to be like do photography exhibitions. And I was like, how does a calendar get you to there? Like, how do you go from calendar to exhibitions? So I wanted to have more of that sort of stated goals in that space. I was confused on the numbers. So one of them was, how would an advertiser use the space in the calendar with only a 200 production run over doing some other kind of advertising? So I felt like that could have been explained a little bit more. Also, who were the target advertisers that they were thinking to reach out to? I also was like, how many, because you're going to have 200, but how many are you planning to sell across Indiana? Because 200, there's way more counties than that. So that's what, 2 per person in a county. So I just was like, add more to that, like rework those numbers and maybe make it bigger. Or if it's a small run, maybe there's a specific community, maybe it's the Knox County, which is fine. And then I asked, how are you going to engage the community? And I wanted more of a clear understanding of the community you plan to work with and eventually sell the products to. Like, who are they? How are you going to reach them on social media and in those social media groups? And sort of be clear on the distinction between community engagement and like target marketing selling. Because I feel like, particularly with this one, there was like, I'm going to sell things, but then my community, and I'm like, well, actually community engagement is kind of different than what you're selling to, though you can overlap them in some ways, but the way you approach them is differently. So I wanted more depth on that, but yeah.
Can we get a tiebreaker in here?
Yeah, I can kick in here.
Okay.
As a commercial photographer, it can be difficult trying to balance all those things and find your clients, your where your vision is going to go and actually meet the road and combine with people that will actually purchase and buy your art. And as a commercial photographer, your market's going to be different than I think what our grantee here is seeking out and what they're looking for. And the thing that I kind of hit on right away was, it seemed like we were putting a lot of our eggs in one basket, and that was the Facebook basket. So my question was, could you expand on that a little bit? Like, do you have a backup if Facebook doesn't generate the volume of sales you anticipate? And that is a small run of 200. I did think it was well detailed and put together well, but I'm in agreement with everybody else, all the other panelists so far. And I also wondered if it'd be beneficial to include a payment from the grant to the artist himself. And then the one question that I run into myself, and I'm sure a lot of photographers have, is, are you confident your printer can deliver the run by the end of the year? A lot of time, the lead times, they'll tell you, yeah, we'll have it ready. And you're 2 months out, and then all of a sudden you find out the calendar's not going out until the middle of next year. At that point in time, it's too late. So I just wanted to point that one out as well.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, we'll go ahead and move to the next application, which is Mitchell Shoring, and our first reader is Jaleesa.
Yes. Okay. So this one, I felt like their goals were fine, and there was a clear direction of their goals and focus on their goals. The feasibility section I thought was fine, but actually I'm going to say this and then you're going to be like, no, actually, but what I wrote in here was, remember to also include your in-kind donations you're receiving, such as the building space and the wall, right? Like you're doing a mural, people are giving that to you, you're not paying for it. So that's in kind. But then I also wrote, as well as your own in-kind labor, materials, and equipment. But then I read later that that was something that they were told not to add into the application, I think. So they can ignore that feedback if they want to. One consideration though, is how could you include yourself as a line item in your budget? Right? Like you should also get paid as an artist in this space. And so I felt like they could have thought about where that might fit into this, because they're doing a lot of that work. The community engagement one, yeah. So this one is the one where I felt like the goals section talked more about community engagement than the community engagement section. So I felt like there was a missing piece in the community engagement, which is when they talked in their goal section about unveiling and having a live Q&A with the community. I was like, that's that community engagement. That should be in here. And so expanding on that and talking about, will they be showing the tangible results of the project and its potential impact on the community that it's been working on and within with where this mural is existing, this piece.
Gotcha. Thank you, Jaleesa. Jane?
There I am. I don't have a lot to add to Jaleesa. I agree quite a bit with her. I kind of resonated especially with what she said about the budget part. A lot of these artists, and I think this is a common problem, we forget to compensate ourselves in the budget. And we're so used to doing the work out of the love of our hearts. And I think, you know, as an arts community, we need to become fully aware of the value of the work and the number of hours that we put in. So I really did like that Jaleesa pointed that out. And I might add, for any of these other artists who have put these applications in, that they might reconsider making sure that they, I don't want to be so crass as to say put a price tag on their time, but their time is valuable and their work is important. So that should definitely be part of any application or any budgeting going forward. I think that everything about this artist and the restructuring of a pre-existing mural and the fact that he's engaging the building owners, the people that work in the building, the community engagement part is pretty cohesive and good. I really was encouraged to see that he values publicizing and reaching out to media sources to raise awareness in the community regarding this project. The end.
Thank you, Jane.
Welcome.
Joshua?
I think it's an absolutely wonderful idea. I got completely hung up on one part of the feasibility, and I feel very strongly to just voice this. The nuts and bolts of the live Q&A, as well as the video that's being shot. I need more details on who's shooting it. Is it being shot for free? How that will affect the budget. And then I need more, like the event planner doing a big gig brain came out, and I'm like, you know, live Q&A with the community. Does that mean 5 people? Does that mean 10 people? If there's more than 20 people, then you begin to start getting into logistic thing of like, how is the Q&A broadcast? If there's 50 people, you're going to need a sound system to, you know, amplify the volume. Plan B, what if it's inclement weather on the Q&A day? What if, you know, should you have a script ready to go so people are asking, you know, intelligent, pertinent questions? So that, I love the idea. I just wanted more details with the live Q&A aspect, more kind of nuts and bolts to be communicated.
Okay, thank you. To get additional feedback. Any other comments? Okay, well, we will move on to our next application, and that's Sarah Katie Bomer. And our first reader is Joshua.
I'm pulling my stuff up. Goals are clearly stated. I'm trying to, I wrote something on feasibility. I'm trying to remind myself. Feasibility and community engagement are closely linked with this particular project. I think actively networking online and in person would be a great way to get sponsors, local sponsors, and ideally regional, national sponsors could be added as part of a strengthening the feasibility section. But as far as timeline and regularly creating content, I think it's really solid. And I think the community engagement is well written and well thought out. So it's, yeah.
Great. Thank you, Joshua. Yeah. And Jane.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was a very concise and good application and very well articulated throughout. I'm going to have to defer to other experts on the panel to discern whether gaining the number of followers and the time frame she established is realistic. I'm guessing that it might be. She seems to have a good mentor in her father when it comes to that area. So yes, that's what I have to say about that.
Excellent. Any other comments from the panel? Okay, well, we'll go ahead and move to the next application, which is Sharon Bonner, and our first reader is Jane. And when Jane's done, Dean, you're our second reader.
Okay, so Sharon has a very short-term, clear, realistic goal in mind, very practical approach to making her lovely artwork more accessible in a shorter time frame, and that she wants to invest in a printer. I think that's a fantastic goal. I think it's quite feasible. We do some in-house printing ourselves, and so we're always nervous about the quality of the printer. So I'm guessing that she is getting good input because good equipment makes such a difference in this artist's work. I think the community engagement aspect is the strongest aspect of this artist's application. I am also a resident of Central Indiana, and I think artists and small business owners that raise the quality of life in their neighborhoods are the key to revitalizing and restoring our neighborhoods. So I'm excited for her aspirations, and I pray that this artist's charming artwork will be found in every home in her local community, and beyond that her potential store can become a peaceful, joyous gathering place for many. It just was a heartwarming application for me to review.
Jane. Dean?
Yeah, thank you, Jane. For the goals, I had a few questions. What other forms of sale could you pursue? And what impact would that have on your profits, such as online sales platforms? So I think of things like Etsy. I think your prints and the way that you want to sell them would do really well on a platform such as that. And two, have you considered selling your reproduction prints in limited series? So valuations that are stepped and something that might help induce clients to collect them. And for your feasibility, I wanted to see you explain your timeline in a fashion that's maybe a little bit more results oriented with specific goals. It's kind of like the carrot and the stick approach. And with locking down quarterly dates and sales goals help you drive that success. And finally, for community engagement, could you involve your greater community beyond the zip code that you noted, and would possibly telling us more, driving connections to additional social groups, help broaden your profit potential?
Great, thank you. Other feedback from the rest of the panel? Amy?
Yeah, Dean, could you say a little bit more about the locking down quarterly dates? And then was that connected to the sales goals?
Sure. Yeah, it's part and parcel of it all. I find in my own experience, if you have quarterly sales goals, dates, again, it's that carrot and stick approach. if you set goals for yourself and you don't achieve them, sometimes you can learn from that. And then sometimes when you set goals and you exceed them, you can see where things actually were more successful than you anticipated. But no one's going to help you more than yourself, and no one's going to drive you more than yourself. And if you don't set goals, if you don't set dates, times, with realistic expectations, you're not going to move or progress maybe as rapidly as you could. And that just seems to really help.
Thanks, that's really helpful.
Great. Then we will move on to our next application, which is Tanner Scott Lemon, and our first reader is Dean.
All right, just bringing it up. Give me a minute.
So for my application for Scott Lemon, someone else's information is pulling up on, it's about the grief space. It's not aligned, so.
Right, that's the issue I'm having. Let me go to the other lemon and see what pops up.
It's the other lemon, I think.
Okay.
Oh,
We're looking at Tanner Scott Lemon.
I was looking at Scott Lemon.
So it should be Tanner as the first name.
Yeah,
Scott.
Tanner Scott Lemon is pulling up with the wrong information.
So all I have listed is Scott Lemon, and when I pull that up,
well, there's two, it looks like Justine Scott Lemon, and then there's a Tanner Scott Lemon. So it's just,
let me click it. The other one that I have listed is just Lemon.
Just Lemon.
Let me bring that up.
So who's the artist with the grief space? Does anybody remember the name?
That is Justine Scott Lemon.
Okay, so maybe it's mixed up.
And then Tanner has an EP, a painting, and a clothing design project.
Okay, so it's reversed because the one I pulled up that's just listed as Lemon, that's the EP one with the 3 to 4 song EP. So that's the one you want us to do.
That one.
Okay, so for the one where we're planning to do the 3-4 song EP, complete with 3 to 4 paintings and release 3 to 4 clothing designs. For the goals, would inclusion of examples or illustrations of the clothing designs and their relation to the project garner additional interest from potential clients? I didn't see anything, so it'd be interesting to see that. And maybe a further explanation of the major failing systems of the Earth and how the project relates to that, such as affecting that change and addressing those disparities. I just wanted to hear a little bit more detail about that. And then moving to feasibility, would including more definitive project partners, maybe cohorts, prior to project commencement, assist in achieving success. And could you expand your listening and reveal party to a larger venue, or maybe ramp up participation to a larger audience? What effect would that have for your exposure? That might help. And I think the only other suggestion I had was for community engagement. Could engaging a larger audience as you work along your project timeline and incorporate their feedback help create some buzz? Would additional partners like local designers, artists, musicians, and collaboration help you monetize your brand?
thank you, Dean. Shantae?
So for the artist goals are clear, but the path and how to get there needs more consideration. The artist wants to take on a major task of innovating major systems, but realistically, what is the connection between selling artwork and how these goals will be reached? For feasibility, the longest process was creating the songs, which is already done, so that takes away from that time, and the budget and timeline are thoroughly mapped out. As far as community engagement, I agree and said, what would it look like? Well, I would like to see how this project would reach a broader community and how the project is relevant to the community and their needs.
Other comments? Josh? What?
I had a question about regarding feasibility. I just wanted more information about what does advertise email list mean?
Yeah. I think for me, so I used to be a finance manager. So when I look at budgets, it scares me when I see words like stuff. Like that scared me. So I put on here that that's something that they need to really think about what each piece is going towards and expand on that, not just stuff, but maybe art materials or whatever it actually is. It should look like a real budget because stuff could be anything, right? And I know they laid it out within it, but still, I feel like those headings need a little bit of work there.
Is that generally what we see as miscellaneous? And then you're looking for more detail of what that would include?
Yeah, but I hope that it wouldn't say miscellaneous. I used to investigate those things. I used to go and be like, what exactly is this? So it just helps when people are clear about that.
So I'm wondering if the stuff is material, if they could say materials because it looks like stuff and then they listed the stuff, but maybe materials and then list the materials to make it sound better.
Amy, did you have something to add or looking for clarity?
Yeah, I just missed one thing. Dean, when you were speaking, you said at the beginning, maybe include examples of clothing designs and their relation to the music, and then that could possibly increase something. Do you remember what that was?
Yeah, let me take a look through my comments. Okay. I'm digging. Sorry.
No problem.
Okay, would inclusion of examples or illustrations of your clothing designs and their relation to your project garner additional interest from potential clients? Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, that was it. Thank
Okay.
you. So are you saying sort of tying in the 3 project ideas so that
Right. So what's the continuity amongst all those things? So is there a song related to a specific shirt? Or are there 3 shirts related to specifically 3 songs? Does it talk about the artist? Does it talk about the song? Does it have a theme to it, a color, a design? It's just some continuity with that.
Okay, thanks.
Great, thank you. And we have our last application, which is Zachariah Roy, and our first reader is Joshua.
I love this idea. It's great. The goals to me were very well thought out, clearly explained. Feasibility, the timeline seems very realistic. An observational thought regarding feasibility, and take this with a grain of salt because I'm a musician. I would maybe suggest putting some time or research into the online class business model research. I don't even know what you'd call it, but there are so many online courses out there that I wouldn't want all the eggs to be put into the first course that's only available for purchase. I bet you putting a little bit more thought and energy into, how do you hook people? Give them a little, I don't know, 2-minute, 5-minute segment for free. I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. If you want more, then pay for my full course. Just kind of doing some research on that. Another idea is to possibly take this idea and incorporate it and condense it into a YouTube channel, where it's, just it's the act of the carving but sped up. I've just seen a gazillion Instagram videos of people making food really, really quickly, and it gets a gazillion views. And like, this seems like one of those, this would be perfect for that. And that could very easily generate online income. The community engagement was really, really great. The only thing, and this is completely nitpicking, I would include past customers as well as potential future customers as another aspect of the artist's community. Because obviously the past customers are fans of the artist's work, and you want them to come along with you and ideally become advocates. So that's like a small thing to maybe add for the community section. Overall, though, I love it. It's very, very interesting.
Okay, thank you, Joshua. Jaleesa?
Yeah, so I agree that the goals section was really concise and clear, and I even put an exclamation point in that section for them because I thought it was good. The feasibility, I thought was a fine section that, however, they may want to consider how they're going to use the money for their tech equipment, because they talk about having a laptop, and with what they want to do, a laptop that's going to do all the things you want, have all the space and the power, it's probably going to cost more than $1,000, plus adding in things like external hard drives to store all of your videos and all the other stuff they're doing. So that I felt like needed to be added to that cost, and for them to sort of consider that. And then the community engagement, I wanted to know a little bit more about how the project connects to them overall, because I think in the beginning they talked about wanting to be part of the maker community and eventually have a maker space for them. But then in their section, they talk more about this professional community that they're going to extract value and feedback from. And so I wanted to know how the project was going to meet both of those different communities. They seem different to me. Yeah.
Other comments? Okay, hearing none, that concludes the panel for the South Central Cohort or On-Ramp Local 2021. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.